Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the National Network of Credit and Financial Professionals. I am here today with speaker Robert Day, Managing Partner at weaudit.com, who will be presenting on PCI compliance. A few items to get out of the way before we begin. If you have any questions during the course of the presentation, you can ask them through the questions function on your side panel. We will gather all those questions and save them for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. We will also be sending a copy through email after the presentation is complete. The last item is that we will have a brief survey that pops up after the webinar ends. It only takes about 30 seconds to fill out, but it gives us a lot of great information on how we can continue to make our webinar better for you. Now Ken will give a brief a brief intro of our speaker.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Robert is the managing partner of weaudit.com, and he's recognized as the industry expert of merchant processing, a one-of-a-kind auditing firm that is revolutionizing the world of merchant processing by protecting merchants' profits, often cutting their fees in half. For 13 years, he was a top executive for one of the largest credit card processors in the country before crossing the aisle and co-founding weaudit.com. As a former corporate executive and former business owner, Robert has a specialized blend of experience and an innate understanding of the needs of small to mid-sized merchants, as well as Fortune 500 companies. He has appeared on NBC, ABC, and CBS television affiliates, speaking on how merchants can cut their credit card processing fees in half. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the webinar back over to Robert to begin our presentation.
Well, thanks, guys. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. And, this is kind of one of those topics that typically is well attended when we speak on it. And the reason being is because it's just a very ugly, really, industry in the sense that it scares people. I mean, when you think about all the things that they say, do, don't do, it's going to cost you this, it's going to cost you that, all the breaches and things like that go on, and there again, kind of how you can protect yourself. So kind of one of the things before we kind of get into the traditional slides, just to really kind of give you guys an overview of the game here of what we're going to talk about. And that is really just kind of taking you behind the scenes and as I kind of say, really putting a tranquilizer and taking that big ugly bear and turning it into a house pet. Because most merchants, when you think of PCI, it amazes me, quite honestly, how many of people they don't even look at it, right? So they'll see on their statement non-compliant, but then they're just like, well, I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm just going to file it away. Another thing that you often will see on your statement that's interesting is that you'll see a fee for PCI compliance, and then you're going to see a fee for non-PCI compliance. I always like that because I'm always a little bit going, wait a minute, so they're charging you to be compliant, and at the same time, they're charging you because you're not compliant. So, I mean, that one really kind of blows my mind. But at the end of the day, most people just look at this and they just think, well, this is just so overwhelming. What do I need to do? Who's responsible for it? It's an IT issue. It's a finance issue. I mean, kind of really, where does this thing rest? When it goes up the food chain a little bit, then, the controllers and CFOs are always kind of like, hey, you deal with it. And it kind of just gets pushed around. Nobody ever really does much with it because nobody ever really takes ownership of it. And they don't take ownership of it because they don't want it. And why don't they want it? Because it's confusing and it's ugly and it's scary. And then you feel like if you touch it and something does go wrong, wow, that just went your job, right? I mean, hey, we just got this massive breach and you were supposed to protect us from this. And you didn't fill out the right documents and you didn't touch this right way. And so you just kind of shut your eyes and just go, and you hope for the best. Now let me tell you, I've talked to a lot of merchants, so I can guarantee without even talking to any of you, I'm talking to you, because there's a bunch of you on the phone that can sit there and say, man, I can relate to that, right? That's kind of my scenario. So let's just kind of jump into things, and like I say, as we kind of go through, we're going to talk about, you know, what is even PCI? What's it for? Where did it come from? All those type of things, right? And then, of course, then we're going to talk about, you know, what it means as far as, it just means, it's a shortened term, actually. It's PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, okay? And then, of course, it's continuously changing standards. Over the years, if you notice, especially if you like have a swipe terminal as an example, one of the things that they constantly are doing is saying, hey, this terminal is being grandfathered. This terminal no longer is supported. So they had terminals at one point that worked, right? And then all of a sudden they're saying, hey, with the new changes, these no longer are supported. So that's one of the things that they've done. Now, one of the things I want to talk about, and this is kind of a key thing, it may seem like a nothing thing, but PCI, they've had those standards from day one. They knew how to make those terminals from day one do what they needed it to do. But it became a cash cow for them. In other words, let's just roll out this update and this mandate, and then in another year, we're going to roll out another mandate update. And so what ends up happening is you buy one piece of equipment, now you buy another piece of equipment, now you buy another piece of equipment, and so on. So it's been very lucrative for the processing industry, not the merchant side of things, but the other side, the banks, the processors, the ISOs, right? They're all making a ton of money off of these, because they turn around and they'll sell like a $200 terminal, and they'll say, oh, this has got the newest updates and da-da-da-da-da, and you'll spend $800 to $2,000. I hear people spending $2,000 for a $200 machine. But if you don't know, you don't know, right? So who owns this standard? Okay, and we're going to talk about that. And of course, that's the Security Standards Council. Okay, they're the ones. Well, who is that though? That's just your Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. They're the ones actually driving this. So they kind of make up the rules to protect them, right? And nothing really to protect you. Because amazingly enough, nothing to this date has actually protected the merchants from anything. Everything is all about protecting the actual networks from everything, and then penalizing you when you don't play along. And of course, if you want to learn more directly from their website, there's the address, of course, just PCISecurityStandards.org. So here, I do want to play this short little, very short little clip. Gives a little break in the fun here. And I'm going to turn the sound up if I can, so maybe it'll feed through and you guys can hear it okay. Now, whether you could hear the sound on that or not, here's the reason I brought that slide into the equation, because I really wanted you to be able to visualize this. That doesn't happen anymore, except for in the movies. When's the last time anybody heard about an armored car robbery, right? It doesn't exist. And why? Because the people that do this, they found out one thing. These things hurt. They hurt a lot. They don't like getting in shootouts with cops or anybody else, right? So that type of theft is dead. And that's kind of an important thing to take note of. Why? Because so many businesses are concerned that the theft is coming in the traditional method. But it doesn't. Theft nowadays comes from this right here. A guy just sitting on a laptop, whether it's the beach, the parking lot, somewhere else, this is where your theft is taking place. I recently watched a movie. It's a pretty good little mini-series about the Harley Davidson. And the one thing that I thought was a kind of a cute takeaway line in there is the guy said, he said, theft by pen. You know, and that's true, because basically what they were doing, they were using a pen to take all of his property and his land. But in this case, They're just using a laptop, setting right out somewhere in a parking lot somewhere, or there again, even on the beach, and hacking your systems. So what are some of the common mistakes that businesses make? Okay, filling in forms with credit card numbers and leaving them in filing cabinets. I cannot stress to you enough what a no-no this is. Now, we're going to talk about how you can become compliant, but one of the things that I will tell you, no matter how easy it is to become compliant, these mistakes are still mistakes that will kill you. In other words, you're holding in your hand the certificate that says you're 100% compliant, so you feel really good about it. But the mistakes I'm getting ready to talk about right now are still going to take your business down if you're doing them. So, filling out forms with credit card numbers. Somebody comes in, whether it's over the phone, they come in and they fill out a work order, you know, they're delivering, you know, goods to a job site, whatever, and they're writing down a credit card number on an invoice, and they're taking it back and they're putting it in a file cabinet. And somebody says, well, that's okay, though. It's locked up. None of the employees can get to it, blah, blah, blah. It amazes me how many vans that I see. I don't know if you guys have Quick Trips where you live, but Quick Trips is just a common gas station here where I live. And I see them all the time. All the time, these service trucks just pulling in. Heating and air conditioning companies, plumbers, you name it. And I'll walk past them, and their truck windows are down. And I look right in the front seat, and what do I see? One of those little, you know, notepad things where they can write their work orders. And I guarantee there's credit card numbers written on those things. Unbelievable. But even making it the most secure that you can, locking it up right inside of your office. Guess what? I want to break into your pipe fitting business, your brick business, stone business, whatever businesses you have. All I have to do is throw a pork chop over there, let the dog go eat it. I kick in your back door with a pry bar. Next thing you know, I'm into your place, and I'm taking pictures of all of these, right? Or I even use your copier to make copies and put them back. You call the cops, you say, I don't understand. Somebody obviously broke into our business, right? But nothing's missing. No. Millions of dollars could potentially be missing, because while you fill out a credit card statement or number and you only maybe billed somebody 30, 40, 50 bucks, what if they have $20,000 open to buy on those cards, $50,000 on corporate cards, right, or more, right? All of a sudden, that's what you're at risk. So you're not out at risk of the $20. You're out at risk of the hundreds of thousands of dollars that could be spent, if not over $1 million, that could be spent on those credit cards. So you cannot write down numbers on a credit card. The other thing is, kind of same thing. You're putting it on a sticky note. It's unbelievable how many people will sit there and say, oh, let me get your credit card number. And I know, even as I do business now, somebody will say, let me get your credit card number. And I know in the conversation, they've not had a chance to pull up the screen. So what are they doing? Right? They're writing it down. And I'm like, hey, do you have it ready to type in yet? Oh, yeah, give me just a second here. Right? They're actually writing it down on something, and then they're going in. Now, here's the crazy thing. You might think that people won't do this, but they will. They will go through your trash. People are pros at this. They will go through your trash. So the next thing you know, you've had a breach on some credit card numbers, and you're looking, going, well, we've never been broken into. We've never done this. We've never done that. No. Somebody took your trash bags and went through your trash in the comfort of their own home. And that's how they got it. And even if you take those things and think, okay, I'm going to throw that one away and shred that one, you guys have all seen the tricks where you take the pencil and, you know, swipe it back and forth. And believe it or not, that's how desperate these guys are and how good they are at it. Keep in mind, you only need one sticky note with a credit card number. Next thing you know, you got $20,000 worth of goods being shipped to some bogus address. So if you think they won't dig through your trash and go to that degree, you're wrong. That is how a lot of these things take place. There again, one of the other bigger mistakes is asking people to email you their credit card numbers, right? Now, there's some that are encrypted, but most people who think they have encrypted email service, they do not, right? You may have a really good email thing at your work, and the IT department's like, oh, yeah, our email's really safe, blah, 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 right? That is not the same thing as an encrypted email service. So unless you know for a fact you're using an encrypted email service, do not ask anybody to email you a credit card, okay? The other thing here is, okay, throwing away papers. There again, we kind of talked about that. Throwing away dial terminals. So if you have a dial terminal, right? Now, this is kind of one too, that if if you have a dial terminal, when you go to sell it or get rid of it, maybe it's broken, you just throw it in the trash. Any credit card numbers that you put in there since it's been batched out are still in there. It takes 2 wires and a AA battery to pull those numbers off. So please make sure, okay, that you're not doing that. The other thing, letting terminals or equipment be replaced without validating credentials. This is a real amazing scam. This is one of the big ones that happened at TJ Maxx years ago. They walk in, they say, hey, we're here to work on your equipment, right? We're from, blank, 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 merchant services, okay? And so they got a very generic thing. So they either, they add either a swiper, basically, or skimmer to it that's going to skim the data, or the other thing is they replace it with new equipment. But guess what? That new equipment is actually not sending it to merchant services. That new dial terminal that you just put in is now going out the door to them, okay? So again, you're excited because they're like, hey, we're here with the new equipment, and you're thinking, okay, well, who's ripping me off by sending me a brand new $300 machine? Okay, these guys aren't crooks, they're the good guys, right? No, they're actually giving you bogus machines that are going to them. Okay, they're again not running background choices on your employees. So you want to make sure whoever's touching your credit card information, is 100% validated with a thorough background check. Because again, they're not just keying in something. They're not just a $9 or $12 an hour customer service rep. There's somebody who's touching and having access to potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. You wouldn't just let somebody all of a sudden go and get into the bank vault, right, and have access to tens of thousands of dollars and not do a background check on them. If they're in customer service and they're taking a credit card number over the phone and they have any type of access to it, you need to be treating them the same, okay? Bottom line is, don't store credit card data, period. This is it. This is the beginning. This is the end. You do not write it down. You do not accept it. You don't let anybody give it to you. You don't take it in any version. You want to drive everything to the web. You want to drive everything out to a virtual terminal. You do not want somebody calling you and giving you credit card numbers. You don't want anybody emailing you and giving you credit card numbers. And let me be also very clear. One of the things that you might say, well, wait a minute though. All sounds really great, right? Like, I'm not supposed to do that, but I'm supposed to do this. But this is so hard. No, you can take credit card and set up a virtual terminal for $10 a month. $10 a month is all it costs to have a payment gateway that actually will allow somebody to go to your website and literally click on the link that says pay my invoice and type everything in and send it to you. $10 a month. So there's no reason why you would not want to do that, right? That's cheap, it's easy, and it takes all the burden off of your employees, and it, more importantly, takes all the risk away from you, okay? So let's look at some of the numbers. 81% of store payment, 81% store payment card numbers. So in other words, you're storing these numbers. So you should make sure that they're, again, that those are going to be compliant. 73% store the expiration dates, okay? And of course, 71% store the verification codes. 57% store the MegStripe data, okay? 16% store other personal data. And again, this is just kind of letting you know what the industry standards are of basically what everybody does. Now, should you be doing this? Yes and no. You should not be doing it on your system. I don't care how great your system is. As you guys well know, right, even Experian. I think we have to agree Experian's probably got a pretty hefty network, right? A lot of security. Not sure if you guys all on the phone have heard, but they were just breached, right, just this week. So again, I mean, these are some really big institutions with really big systems, and their business, by the way, is protecting business, right? So in other words, they don't sell widgets and then trying to have a secure network. Their whole business is having a secure network. Like, that's what they do, and yet they were breached. So what you want to do is you want to keep this information off-site in a virtual environment, or some people call the cloud. A lot of people say that what is the cloud? They think, oh, I mean, it's funny how many people ask me, like, where's the cloud? The cloud is probably somewhere in the desert in Phoenix, and it looks like probably like a utility company or something of that nature. But it's got armed guards, and you think it's a power plant or something like that. And that is the cloud. Those are servers that are stored off-site, and they store for a lot of companies, not just your company, but they're going to store for a lot of them. But how do you use those? Well, it's simple. You just get what's called a virtual terminal. A virtual terminal, there again, is just something you would log on to like a webmail, but only it's taking a payment over the phone kind of thing. You would log on to that and post the payment in there. But again, you don't want to do that. You want your clients to do that. So you want to make that virtual terminal talk to your website, or you can attach a link to an invoice, or other different ways. When you send out an invoice, you can say, here, click on this invoice here and pay your bill. And boom, goes right to the virtual terminal. They key in the payment. That payment then goes and resides in the cloud. And guess who's not storing data? You. Why? Because you're not supposed to store data. If you don't have the data, then you can't be responsible for, well, that'd be losing the data, okay? So merchant levels. This is kind of a thing that I'm going to blow through pretty quick because, again, you guys are going to get copies of all of this. And so for the sake of time, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this boring stuff anyway. But the merchant level determines the degree, rigor, and the organization will be subject to for the purpose of verifying PCI compliance, okay? So in other words, what are they saying as far as your size, how big you are, to basically what you have to do. So level 1 is obviously over 6 million transactions, and this is kind of going through all the different things that you have to do in order to comply with what it is that you're supposed to be doing, okay? So again, not going to spend a lot of time on these details because they're, again, for the sake of time, going through all of them, and a lot of them are going to be redundant as we kind of move on, because then you're going to see, for instance, the level 2, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you guys to go back when you get this, right, or look at it even now, and you can kind of look at this and say, oh, okay, this is kind of where I fit into this, right? This is how many transactions I do. Now, take note, too, right, of one of the things that's kind of unique about this, right, and that is what? That is, it's not based on dollars. It's based on transactions. So a lot of people very quickly get confused because they're like, oh, when you speak to a merchant, they're like, well, I'm a $10 million a month merchant. I'm a $50 million a month merchant, right? They speak in dollars. They don't speak in transactions. So you could technically be a much smaller company in volume dollar-wise, right, and find yourself being basically with more stringent PCI compliance because you're doing a lot of smaller transactions, because it's the transactions that will get you, not going to be necessarily the dollar values it's going to get you. So there again, this is where probably a lot of you will fit, right, is in this area right here, under 20,000 transactions annually. So a lot of people actually fit into that category. I mean, you got to do a lot to do over 20,000, okay? So that's a very easy way to go. So best practices for PCI compliance, okay? And that is to know the risk, right? What are you up against, okay? And of course, one of the biggest things that we're always, worried about as a company is the most important thing that we have. What is that? That's our brand, okay? Basically, once your brand is toast, then you're toast. Now, with one exception, Wells Fargo. I just don't understand that one. Wells Fargo makes the news almost weekly for cheating people and taking advantage and doing all these things, and not to pick on poor Wells Fargo because none of these guys are necessarily perfect. But at the end of the day, these guys are constantly being busted for wrongdoing. And then I sit and I say to people, I'm like, but I bet you here's the interesting thing. Go sit outside one of their branches and watch people still walk in and do banking with them like it never happened. So they're kind of a miracle worker. I mean, I don't know what they do that they can get away with what they get away with, but most people, most companies, when you're caught multiple times, like week after week after week for something kind of new that you did, that's going to hurt you. Wells Fargo has weathered the storm very well. So, but for you, I wouldn't take that chance. I would try to make sure that you're doing everything you can, because it can really almost kill your business by killing your sales, right? The other thing is the lawsuits. I mean, so you got to remember, like for instance, we have a big breach that took place here, Schnucks, with one of our grocery stores, and the lawsuits were just absolutely massive and drove up a lot of fees for them. So that was a big thing that they had to contend with. And of course, the fines. So here's one of the things, though, that's kind of a critical thing. So the card issuer fines, a couple points on this one. One, if you are non-compliant, so if you look at your merchant processing statement and you have a non-compliant fee, in other words, PCI non-compliance fee, right out of the gate, you're not compliant. So that's a very easy way to tell. Now, some of you may look at your statements and say, well, that's not on my statement, so therefore I am compliant, right? No, false assumption. Doesn't mean you're compliant. When they bill you for not being compliant, yes, that's a no-brainer, you're not compliant. But when you don't see anything on your statement, it doesn't mean you're compliant. So what it does mean is you need to contact your processor and ask for a copy of your certificate showing you're compliant. Now, the reason I say that is because when you call up and you talk to Billy or Susie or whomever, and they say, oh, yeah, don't worry about it, you're compliant, right? We take care of all of that for you. You're good to go. You hang up and you say to your boss, I called, and Susie said, we're good to go. Next week, next month, next year, guess what? You've been breached. So now they're going to come out and they're going to do an investigation. They're going to ask to see your certificate showing that you are in fact compliant. And you're going to say, well, let me call back to the processor who told me I was compliant. And then you're like, Susie something, Bill something, somebody who, of course, they don't work there anymore. They've been transferred to Tahiti, you know, and everything else, and they don't remember anything about the conversation because now they're going to be on the hook because they gave you bad information, right? But you're really ultimately on the hook because you're trying to tell your boss that you took care of this and there's no way to validate it, right? So just because somebody says that you're compliant is not what you need. What you need is your certificate. Listen, when you graduated from high school or college or wherever, you didn't just have somebody go, hey man, congratulations, you've graduated. No, you got a certificate. You can hang it on the wall. You can show to people. You can say, look, right there on the wall, that's my certificate showing that I've accomplished this, right? Proof, if you will. Okay, but if you just say, yeah, I went to college, got my PhD and whatever, right? There's no proof of it. You can't go interview and tell somebody that. Say, hey, yeah, I got my PhD in English literature, and just have them just say, well, that we don't want to see any proof of that. We don't want to see anything. And nor will the card issuers accept that. You have to have that certificate. Now, let me be also clear about why you need the certificate. Because if you have the certificate, you are still on the hook if you are in fact breached. You still are going to pay fines. You're still going to be in trouble, okay? You're still going to have to cover those losses. But if you do not have the certificate, or if, in other words, if you're not compliant, then the rumor is, and they've never put in writing, but the rumor, so to speak, and it's a fairly good rumor because it's been around for about 20 years and it bounces around the industry with events that have actually happened, that they say the fines are typically about doubled. Now, the reason I say it's rumor is because Visa MasterCard does not say, hey, if you do this, this is your fine. If you do this, this is your fine. If you do this, this is your fine. No, what we see is this company was breached, and here's what happened. Non-compliant, this is their fines. Similar company got breached, right? Non-compliant, and then this is their fines. So it seems like there's this kind of a double down, if you will, for companies that are non-compliant. And think about it. If that weren't true, right, if that weren't even true, then here's the other question. Why even bother getting your certificate? In other words, if you're going to get fined for being breached, then what does the certificate protect you from in the first place, right? So that's the other thing too. The certificate does not mean you won't be breached. It just means you've done everything you've been told to do. So you can still be breached. It just means that you've done what you could do. You've done your best, right? And then the breach still took place. Okay? So up to $500,000 per data security incident is the other thing that you have to be concerned with. And obviously up to $50,000 per day for non-compliance with published standards should something come down on you. Okay? And then, of course, the cost of reissuing all the cards associated with the compromise. In other words, everything, if they send out a new card, they're going to bill you for the card, the postage. I mean, they're going to rack and stack every bill. The other thing is, if you're investigated and found innocent, in other words, the lawsuit or the breach didn't even actually take place at your business, they say those start at about $9,000 to $10,000. So in other words, they just suspect that you've been breached. You could be billed up to $9,000 to $10,000 just for them suspecting it and looking into you. So that's also another one. And then, of course, you could lose the ability to accept cards in the future, so which is obviously really huge.
Friday afternoon.
So build and maintain, right, a secure network. You have to have a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. So again, this is if you're going to hold the data, right? And there again, do not use vendor supplied defaults. I talked to somebody the other day, and they kind of talking about this, and they said, yeah, my password is password. I'm like, are you kidding? Yeah, you definitely need to do something about that. There again, protect the stored cardholder data. Again, only if you're keeping it on your system. But remember what I said, try to eliminate all of this that we're talking about right here by using a virtual environment. So get it off of your system. That's going to be your best option. But if you don't, then these are the things that you're going to have to do. Obviously, use regular updated antivirus software programs, you know, develop and maintain secure networks. Oh, I think we shot past that one.
Very good.
Sorry about that. Hit the button the wrong way.
That sounds great. Thanks a lot.
So, yeah. So this is the one that I wanted to go back to, is develop and maintain secure systems and applications. So in other words, you know, make sure that the data that you're holding, and again, try not to hold it, but if you have to hold it, make sure that your networks are beyond secure, okay? Then restrict access to who can even get to it. So there again, are you just letting anybody have access to it? Are you letting any IT person come in without background checks, etc.? It should be on a need-to-know basis. Like in our systems, nobody really ever has any cross-ability except for senior executives. So only a handful of people can basically see the full picture, right? And so, you know, somebody who's working on this cannot see this, and somebody who's working on this cannot see this. So therefore, nobody can really ever piece everything together. So this is the best way to have your systems designed. Assign a unique ID. So there again, same thing in our system. Anybody touches anything, it monitors their behavior. So if they update an email, it says, hey, this email was updated by this person, right? So you want to make sure you have that kind of security. And there again, restrict physical access to cardholder data. So again, if you're going to have that cardholder data, make sure who can get to it is going to be highly vetted, etc. Again, I said implement a pay my invoice programs. So keep in mind, pay my invoice is just a term I'm using, not necessarily program. I don't know. There may be a program called pay my invoice, but if there is, it is nothing that we're promoting here. I'm just saying, you know, using a link, for instance, to put on the bottom of a statement that you send out, etc., or just saying, hey, go online to our website and make your payments and that kind of thing. So they're, again, using kind of a virtual environment. Okay? And then, of course, track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. So that's going to be more on the IT side of things, obviously, not so much you guys. Same thing, regularly test security systems and processes. And at a minimum, you must have approved scanning vendor. Scan your external network at least once a quarter. Now, again, I know I've said this a million times, but I cannot say it enough. This is for the people wanting to hold the data, not for the people using a virtual terminal, right? So if you use a virtual terminal, you don't have to worry about all these things. Security policy, you do need to have that. Basically, security policy is just kind of saying, hey, what do we do? Who do we do it with? Why do we do it? Things like, hey, don't write things on sticky notes, etc. But the cool thing of it is, there's programs out there that will help you write the security policy. So in other words, you might think, okay, my God, I got enough to do. Now I got to sit down and write a whole manual on these security standards. No, you can actually go into a program and pretty much insert your name, kind of say, yep, I like that one, like that one, like that one, delete that one, edit that one, and pretty much in an hour have a beautiful security policy put together, if not less. Submit reports on quarterly scans and annual reviews. Kind of the same thing. You do have to do these questionnaires. So if you're not doing these questionnaires, odds are you're not compliant, because everyone on the phone should be doing their PCI questionnaires. So that is a definite must for everyone at every size. So that's the other thing. People ask all the time, well, and I kind of went through that a while ago and should have probably asked that or cover that then. But a lot of people will say, am I too big, or am I big enough, or at my size, does it matter, or on both ends of that. So some companies think they're so big, this doesn't apply to them, or some companies think, well, wait a minute, we're a dry cleaner. I mean, we don't have to do this, right? No, if you take credit cards, it applies to you. There again, getting certification is essential to avoid penalties by card brands and stuff of that nature. So again, I cannot stress to you enough, you should be able to lay your hand on your physical certificate. Okay? And then, of course, PCI compliance is more than a one-time annual event, because at the end of the day, there again, you need to be making sure that you're following all these processes. Okay? In other words, yes, I've got my certificate in my hand, but now I can go back to writing on things and kind of taking notes and doing things like that. No, you can't. So you need to make sure that you're living out the PCI compliance. But again, what is living out PCI compliance? So again, when we started this, it was a hairy, ugly thing. So really what it boils down to is really kind of just a very 1, 2, 3 almost. One, we don't store we don't store the card holder data, period. So let's just acknowledge that. Then we need to get our certificate. Okay, we need to have that in our hand. Okay, so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, just get out onto a virtual terminal, right, and use that as a method. Now, some of you're going to have integrated solutions, and that's not going to be an option for you. But for those of you that are in that boat, yes, you have a little bit of a tougher road, but again, those roads are not that tough even for you guys. So let's look at some of these things, what we call PCI options. We call it really the easy way and the hard way, right? So when you think about it, it can be pretty expensive. There's been a lot of companies spend a lot of money. There again, from pricing out overpriced equipment, buying new things, having experts come on site. I mean, just unbelievable stuff. But really, you can do it for the bulk of you on the phone for only $9.95 per mid per month. Okay, there's different companies that will sell it for different prices, but the going rate of what you should be paying is about $10. Okay, so if you're paying more than $10, you're not getting a good deal. Okay, so you want to be in that $10 per mid range. You don't want to be spending more than that. So if you are, obviously you're taking a more expensive rate or round on your own. Okay. But there again, for $10 a month, they'll do the complete hand-holding package for you. So in other words, hey, let me get you on the phone. Let's share a screen. You click on this, click on this, click on this, and they walk you through it. So it doesn't have to be that tough. Which questionnaire? Man, right there alone, huge, right? Because when you go out and you go, okay, wait a minute, your boss might go, hey, aren't these questionnaires online? Can't you go to securitystandards.org and just fill out the questionnaire yourself online? You can. You can get your certificate completely all on your own. Okay? But that's a little bit like telling a 12-year-old to kind of go into the IRS office and find the right forms to fill out the taxes for the year and make sure he gets all the right deductions. Could he? or she? Certainly. If they were like a real brainchild, they were amazing, right? But the reality is they don't know. So just finding the right questionnaire is probably 3/4 the battle on this. And again, you're assuming all the risk when you're going it alone, right? Where if you go with something like the 995 deal, they'll even throw in $100,000 protection up to a maximum of $500,000. So there again, for every MID, you're going to pay $995, and you're going to get $100,000 on each one of those mids, but it will max out at $500,000. Now, a lot of people say, well, but man, that doesn't work for me because I got like 25 locations, I got 50 locations, I got whatever, and $500,000 doesn't seem fair. Well, keep in mind, a breach is a breach, right? You can have 50 locations and somebody else has one location, but once you're in, you're in. So in other words, having 50 locations doesn't put you at more risk, and it's not going to make your bill necessarily any higher, okay? The breach, once they get in, they're pretty much into everything. And so it doesn't matter that your business is spread out over 25 or 50 locations versus if it was spread out only over one. Okay? Weeks to months to try to figure it out on your own. For most merchants, you can do it in less than 30 minutes. That's pretty crazy. Usually requires IT because there again, people, they don't understand. Like a lot of people are like, you even say the word virtual terminal versus a gateway. They're like, I don't know. Do we use a gateway? Do we use a virtual terminal? You start saying things like it's integrated, non-integrated. They're like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So usually when people start looking at these things, it really makes them more confused than even before they started looking at it. So it doesn't take long to start down this path and kind of want to back away pretty quick because you're going, wow, I'm just starting to look at this and I'm over my head already, right? This one, because they're answering all the questions for you, so to speak. In other words, they're going to put it in plain English. Hey, when you process a payment, you know, are you going out and using the same system, for instance, to do the data entry, ordering, and everything that runs a payment? Are you using that same system that does it all? Oh, okay, well, then you're integrated. Oh, this thing that you're doing, it's like a website. You just type in a payment and that's it. Oh, okay, well, that's a virtual terminal, and so on. So they're gonna speak to you in language that you can understand to help you grasp what it is that you need to do and all of that. And of course, every year you start over, right? You know, so there you go. I mean, with this, you can do one-click renewals, meaning at the end of the day, you can just simply go out, click on something that says, did anything change? If nothing changed. Now, there is one caveat to that, just to be fair and transparent. If the rules changed, and often they do, not too often will they change enough to where you have to redo the whole questionnaire. But again, even if you do, they're going to walk you through it. But let's say the rules don't change that much, that where you would either then be in a one-click renewal situation, nothing's changed, click here, or they may say, hey, since you did this a year ago, we have 2 new questions. So then you have to answer those 2 questions and then click on the one-click renewal. So there's 3 possibilities that can happen. 90% of the time, you're going to fall into a one-click renewal. The other probably 8% of the time, so a total of 98% of the people will answer maybe an additional 2 or 3 questions. And then, of course, the last 1 or 2% are going to say, okay, enough has changed that I have to start the whole process. That's very, very, very rare. And again, let me be clear. So we covered this, and not all of this will work for all of you. Okay, so in other words, you know, some of you guys are going to be on SAPs, you're going to be on ERP, you're going to be in integrated solutions, you're going to be on virtual, you're going to be on dial terminal, and the list goes on and on and on. So is this geared towards, hey, this is exactly for you? Absolutely not, because there's just no way to cover every possible variation. However, this by far, at least all of this applies to all of you, but in a different way. Meaning you may be integrated, but you still shouldn't be writing down credit card numbers. But that just means you can't go to a virtual terminal. Some of you can go to a virtual terminal and eliminate PCI almost completely. So everybody's going to have a little different scenario. So that being said, we've got not quite 15 minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of open it up for questions. And so that way, if you guys do have specific questions to your exact situation, feel free. The other thing is, just so you know, though, too, if you go out to weaudit.com, there again, you can, there's a chat there. You can ask questions anytime you want of our staff. There's no fee for that or anything like that. So if you have questions, even after this, you go back and review it, have more time to think and kind of go, oh yeah, but how about this and how about that and how's that going to work and how's that applied? Just go out to our website. You can call. Our phone number is right on our main page, or there again, it's a friendly chat. You can just chat with agents and they'll walk you through kind of all the different questions that you might have as well. But that being said, we've got about 12 minutes left here, and so any questions you guys have, feel free to take advantage of that right here live today.
Okay, Robert, this is Karen. There are 3 questions that I had posed in our question chain. The first question I have, if you don't store any information on site, do you still need to be compliant?
Well, yes. So I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but if you're saying about, you know, different data, but at the end of the day, if you take credit cards, period, you have to be PCI compliant.
Okay. The next question I have, are you in compliance if you receive credit card numbers over the phone, tokenize, and discard the numbers?
Yeah, you're still going to be compliant just because somebody verbally tells you something over the phone. You can key it in, and yes, and you're going to be compliant. And so where you become non-compliant in that scenario is if you write it down, right? That's where you're going to, you know, potentially get into trouble. Now, also keep in mind, and a great question, by the way, because you brought up tokenization. A lot of companies like to sell tokenization, and they like to make it sound like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Also on that note, a lot of people say we're the PCI compliant, you know, gateway or virtual terminal or blah, blah, blah. So virtually everyone is PCI compliant. I mean, no, let me back up on that one. Virtually everyone has tokenization. But as far as PCI compliant, every one of the providers are PCI compliant. So somebody's saying, hey, I'm PCI compliant, that's why you want to go with me and that's why you want to pay me more. No, because everyone is PCI compliant. There's nobody who's not at this point. As far as tokenization, pretty much the same case. Almost everybody's gone to tokenization. So again, not a separator the way it used to be when it first came out a few years ago. It was the big deal. You know, it was like getting air conditioning in your car for the very first time. Woohoo! You know. But nowadays, if somebody said, hey, our car has air conditioning, you're like, oh, okay. You know, I mean, so does every other car. So anyway, so hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, and the last one, someone just posed, wasn't it Equifax, not Experian?
Oh, did I say Experian? I apologize. Man, yes. Thank you for calling me out on that. Yes, it was Equifax. So I apologize on that. Definitely had that information. If I said that, I was wrong. Yes, it was Equifax who did that. So, yeah, good call. Good catch. Thank you very much for correcting that.
Okay, Robert. With that said, we're going to close today's webinar. I would like to thank Robert for taking the time to present to our group and thank all of today's attendees for taking the time out of their day to join us. Thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you, Robert. We're going to close the webinar today.
All right, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. All right, anything before I run on my end?
No, I believe we're all finished. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You